to present. There we go. Okay, it's working now. So, however you would like.
Yeah, on which computer? In this one?
Yes, that's the one.
Great.
We're filming it from the other one.
Oof.
So if you ever want to talk into it.
No?
Oof.
Okay.
Oh yeah, present. That's fun too.
Yay. Okay.
Perfect.
So I decided to choose the theme impact on children on being born into or raised in a culture group. So first of all, how can I? Oh, it is.
Probably just push sideways, like the arrow, like that would make it move. No.
Nope.
Or you might have to click on the arrow.
There is no arrow.
Let's say it's usually this one right here.
On the screen or what? There is. Yes, that's the problem.
It's probably half and half, so it has to come back from over there. Let's see. It's over there.
Ooh.
There it is.
Okay.
Yay!
Technologies.
Yay!
So, what is a cult? In modern English, a cult is a social group that is defined by its unusual religious, spiritual, or philosophical beliefs, by its common interest in a particular personality, object, or goal. Usually, it is a kind of a social group that has a leader that possesses himself as a god or as a person who speaks from the god, and it's usually connected with religion. Not always, but most of the time. And the main thing is like, we will save you from all the sins. With us, you will be great. The only thing that you can live your life properly is being in our nice group.
Mm-hmm.
Join our sisterhood.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Why is this theme important? There are from 2.5 by 3,000 cults in the United States now, with a dozen of small cults, and overall there is like 300 of thousands or up to 3 million people involved in cults. And as I understand, they are not like eligible, so you can't do it. So all of them are illegal. So there is like 3 million people that are breaking the law right now by the thing that they're doing. But today we're discussing our children, why it is not the great idea to be in a cult when you're a child. The first problem, when you're growing up in a family, you have a very unique family structure. You have parents that are authority of your family, and you have other siblings who are like on the same level, your brothers, your uncles, and all the stuff. When you are in the cult, the hierarchy is changed. There is a cult leader who is a parent for everybody in the cult, and your parents are losing this prior meaning for you. So your authorities are formed in a bad way, and the leader usurps the power from the biological parents and becomes the central, all-powerful figure in the lives of both parents and children. So basic family like relationships are not built correctly. Then socializing system. Usually when you are raised in socium, like ours, you know something about social relationship, how to live in the life. This is like the small environment that lives by their own. And the thing is that they have no idea how to deal with outside world, and the cult leader does not want them to interact with the other world. So basically, children are taught that the world inside the cult is good, while the world outside is evil and to be feared. And they have this strong barrier with the outside world, and this all leads to the structure of cults as conceived to abuse and neglect, as we have one leader who wants everybody to be like his kind of slaves. So do whatever he is saying to do. Both the parents and children are in possession of bill children that can be punished if the leader wants. They can be I don't know, some strange things are happening there. And also, as they are not connected with the world outside the college, they can't have any help of doctors, social workers. So if there is any kind of abuse or neglect or something, nobody will know because they have no connection with the outer world. Um, and last but not the least, the big question is like, why don't they leave this stuff? Like, oh, you're beaten with by everybody for the whole your life. You can just run away. No, you can't. The problem is, especially when you're born there, you have no idea how outside world works. And even if you understand, like, the place I'm now, it's not okay. I should go somewhere. You are not able to do it. There is a story of a young man that decided to run at age 18. He had no education. He was homeschooled, but homeschool made by cult, it's usually like a lot of Bible, no any science or anything like that. Uh, he tried to join military, no documents, rejected. He tried to work, no documents, rejected. So they have like they don't exist in the outside world, but because most of the time they don't even have documents or anything, and it is extremely hard for them to socialize. And usually there are like very few stories of successful escaping cult, and one of them I wanted to show. It will take like um, uh-huh.
If it lets you click on it.
Probably I will need to copy it.
Oh yeah, you could do that.
Google.
Mm-hmm.
I think this one is explaining really good what was going on.
I want to make sure it doesn't do the.
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Dead bugs always.
It's just that noise if they
I grew
have.
up in a valley on the west coast of New Zealand, South Island. Imagine the wildest, most beautiful valley you've ever seen. Lush bush that emerges from foothills into fertile farmland, cut through by pristine rivers that snake down from the Alps above, and a lake that sparkles like polished glass while rainbows write colour in the sky. I grew up in the glory of our Christian community. 500 men, women and children living together and following the doctrines of Jesus Christ. My grandfather was my hero because he brought us to this land and founded the community I loved. Purchasing the 2 farms on either side of the river was a smart move for our group. We migrated from the East Coast and needed a livelihood. I arrived at 6 weeks old, strapped on my papa's back, to what would be home for the first 18 years of my life. My cousins and childhood friends were like brothers and sisters to me. We did everything together. Camping was one of our favourite pastimes. We snuggled in sleeping bags underneath the stars and cooked damper on campfire ashes. Now, earlier today, we were asked to recall our happiest childhood memory. My favourite is Celebration Day. Imagine the coolest party you ever attended as a child. My cousins, my friends and I would gorge ourselves on pink candy floss and drink way too much sugary soda. There were clowns on stilts, bag rides behind tractors, 3-legged races, and a plane that flew over to drop lollies from the sky. The men built us a hydro slide and a flying fox. And on these days, my granddad would decree a day off work for the entire community. So the women stopped working in the kitchen and the men came in off the farm for the festival. And it was all free. We didn't pay for it because we didn't earn wages. We didn't work for money. We worked for the lifestyle and for each other. The money we made in our businesses was kept in a communal bank account. That bank account built the hostels we lived in, put clothes on our back, and food in our mouths. And I knew every single person in my community personally. Not only did I know them, but I knew their husband, their wife, their children, and their grandchildren. We lived in communal hostels. We worked together. We went to school together. We prayed together. I was constantly surrounded by the people I loved most. And at night, I'd skip a couple meters to my cousin's room to socialise or play a deck of cards. I loved working with the other girls in the women's realm. I loved learning to sew, knit, spin, and cook. Music was one of my favourite hobbies. We were taught music in the first year of school, so by the time I was 17, I was competent on 5 musical instruments. Think for a moment about the time you achieved something really important. Remember how it felt? Remember how proud you were in the moment? It probably felt similar to the day I received my first school report. It was the most exciting day of my life as a 6-year-old. I'd scored excellent grades and even better personal comments from my school teacher. So you can imagine my excitement when my grandfather took the school report and read it to the 500 members of my community at dinner. And then he said, "We don't want women like you." My stomach dropped. I turned bright red. There was air being sucked in my nostrils, but I couldn't breathe. So my school teacher had written in my report a sentence that read, "Lilia demonstrates leadership skills, which could be useful for older." And my grandfather humiliated me for hours. And this would become a common theme throughout my life. Afterward, I left that dining room a changed 6-year-old girl. And what changed was my belief I was worth anything more than what he said I was. And as a young girl, I spent the majority of my time with women folk. And because we home birthed big families, the sight of a pregnant belly made me feel at home. My mum grew up with 15 brothers and sisters. I have 9 siblings. I was 7 years old when I saw a newborn baby for the first time. I took the scissors with both hands and snipped the umbilical cord. My cousin was born blue because the cord was strangling him. So after saving him, the midwife did a trauma assessment with me because I was 10 years old at the time. And I held my aunt's hand when her next girl was delivered on a mattress in the back of a van on way to the nearest hospital. Dad was the acting manager for one of the businesses. My mum was the leader of all the women and ran the entire domestic realm of Glory Vale. And I wanted to be just like her when I grew up. Her job was demanding, and because Dad was often travelling for business, she needed help raising the children. So I changed dirty nappies, potty trained, climbed out of bed in the middle of the night to rock them back to sleep, cleaned up spew, knitted them warm clothes, and helped wean them of breast milk. I couldn't wait to grow up and marry a man and have his baby. My girl cousins and I talked about it a lot. So it was a really exciting day for me when I turned 12 and got my period, because I could finally fulfill my purpose in life. And by the time I was 14, I knew who I wanted to fulfill that purpose with. His name was Willing. It would be a worthy marriage. I was the granddaughter of the church founder, and he was the son of Fervent, one of the church leaders. Then one day I was sitting in class when Fervent bolted in the door, dragging Willing by the shoulder. Willing had been disobedient. I don't remember what he had done. It could have been that he combed his hair the wrong way, spoke back to his father, listened to music he wasn't allowed to listen to, or read a book he wasn't allowed to read. It didn't matter. The punishment was the same. Willing was ordered to bend over and pull down his pants. And my stomach rolled when Fervent pulled out the leather belt. We were then told to watch as Fervent beat Willing with it. And I refused to look. Instead, I stared down at my desk and whispered, "Please, God, make it stop. Please make it stop." In that moment, my respect for Fervent's leadership imploded. I knew what he was doing was wrong. They taught us so much about the love of God that as I watched Fervent beat his son, I thought that's not love. And it wasn't love. Even though after Fervent had finished beating his son, he hugged him and told him he loved him. That's not love. I became suspicious of the laws we were being taught. Spare the rod, spoil the child, the leaders said. My blood boiled when one wife brought her child to me and showed me the blue welt on the toddler's back. I gritted my teeth. How can anyone call themselves a Christian and treat a child that way? How can any parent treat a child that way?
Any of you guys presenting? Okay. Are you?
My friend
Do you want
Jubilee
to?
wasn't spoiled.
Well, it's done.
He was
That's fine.
born into one of the least privileged families in our society with no connection to leadership circle. He was the jokester of our class, always saying witty things to make us laugh. Imagine your brother, one of your children, your nephew, a niece, your daughter, the one who makes everyone laugh, the clown. That was Jubilant. And one day at soccer, Jubilant made one too many jokes. And when our teacher Nathaniel began to punch and kick him, my stomach rolled again. The game froze and we looked on horrified. And I thought Nathaniel would stop. But he didn't. He forced Jubilant to walk from the soccer field to the main building, all the while punching and kicking him. And Jubilant was sobbing, raising his hands to shield his head from the blows. And I thought surely Nathaniel will be dismissed as our school teacher. But the next day, he was back in the classroom with us. And I thought, what's wrong with the people running this place? I don't want to have children here. Not wanting children was a sin. It was forbidden. My best friend Grace was an unwanted child. Her mother had given her up at birth and her adoptive parents shipped her from the US to our community, hoping that good influence would set her straight. Excuse me. She was a chocolate-skinned Mexican girl who arrived in Gloria's Island when she was 13, just 3 years older than me. I loved that girl more than life. She giggled lots and made me feel safe. So we became best friends and spent as many moments as we could together. Now, Grace bought personal possessions from the outside world. Music, jewellery, makeup. These were forbidden, and seeing them for the first time made Grace all the more special in my life. Her rebellious spirit inspired me. And over the years, Grace would be punished many times because she refused to be controlled. She was 20 when she came to me and told me the leaders had ordered her marriage to a man she didn't love. She was sobbing, trembling, tears are streaming down her cheeks. In desperation, she packed her bags, hidden them under a tree, called a friend on the outside to come rescue her, but she was discovered, taken before an inquisition of 20 men seated in a small room, condemned, forced to confess she was evil, forced to phone her outside family and say she didn't want to leave anymore. And I thought, fuck them. No one tells my best friend what to do. So I wrapped my arms around her and I said, don't listen to them. You do what you believe is right. Thankfully, her adoptive parents came through. They phoned Gloriavale and threatened to send in the police if Grace wasn't allowed to leave. The next day she was gone. And she now lives happily in Canada. Excuse me. After this incident with Grace, I knew I had to leave too, or I would be forced to marry a man I didn't love. And I knew I had to take my little sisters with me, or the same thing would happen to them. I had one foot out the door already. When I was 11, my oldest sibling ran away. When I was 13, my next oldest sibling ran away. When I was 17, my younger brother threatened to leave. I didn't know it at the time, but my parents were ready to leave too. But they couldn't bear the thought of losing another child. They were waiting for me to come around so we could stay together. After what happened to Grace, I was ready to go. I left Gloriavale with my entire family less than a year after Grace had. And after I left the cult, I became obsessed with learning everything I could about human behaviour because I thought if I can understand myself and others better, I can protect myself. I can make sure no one ever takes advantage of me ever again. And as I wrote the story of my life in a religious cult, I realised the leaders of Gloriavale used cruel tactics to control and manipulate me. They began by using shame to degrade me in front of the people I loved. It started with my grandfather publicly disgracing me for my 6-year-old report card. His actions sent a clear message of who's in charge. We all knew what would happen to people who dared question authority. But it didn't end there. They began using guilt to degrade my self-worth. When I was a child, they told me every day I was a worthless sinner. It was my fault. I was evil. I was the one to blame. When people treated me badly, I thought I deserve it. I struggled to think or act for myself because I was always second guessing. What if it is my fault? What if I am to blame? Now they may have beaten me down, but they messed up when they mistreated the people I loved. My fury towards the injustices suffered by Grace, jubilant and willing, gave me the strength I hadn't been able to muster for myself. I couldn't stand by and watch someone I loved wrongly suffer. Love for others broke the chains that shackled me. But why was I willing to love them and not myself? Eventually I realised that if I could learn to love myself the way I loved Willing, the way I loved Jubilant, and grace the way I love my little sisters, then I wouldn't take anyone's bullshit. So I asked, what does it mean to love myself? What does it mean to love myself so fully that if anyone ever tries to shame me again, I am the first to stand up for myself? I don't have all the answers, but I've come a long way. And I've come to realize that my 6-year-old report card was bang on. And my grandfather was terrified of strong women. I'm a strong woman. I'm a leader. Today I know my leadership skills are priceless. I use them to leave the church and find my own way in a world that honestly still scares the living hell out of me. I used them when I was 23 to run a business and to write a book that teaches others what's possible. Now at 27 years old, I'm using them to stand here with you today. I use them every day to remind my 6-year-old self she can do anything she wants to do and to never let anyone tell her otherwise. Thank you.
Is that? Oh, is that the end? Okay, cool. Let's see if you, I'll send it here. So I want to. Cool. All right. So who wants to present next? Okay. And then are you turned in here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Chanel is under schizophrenia.
Okay, cool. Perfect. Let's get you this downloaded and then go from here. Is it raining outside now too?
Yes.
Oh, boy. It's going to get cold. That's what that means. All right, cool. Here you go. I'll open it that way so you can just go off of a power.
How do I switch the slides for next?
You can just push to the side. Now, I mean, if did it say it's all downloaded? You might have to click on it now as it took a minute to download. So just double click there. And it should open for you. And then push sideways. Hello.
Okay, so the mental health topic I chose was on schizophrenia. What is schizophrenia? It's a disorder, a brain disorder that affects the person's ability to think, feel, and behave clearly. It involves your emotions, like it'll how do I put it? Like it'll just have like your emotions just like all over the place. It's difficult to measure, but estimates from the range of 25% to 64% of adults in the US. Some of the symptoms include hallucinations and not even just like visual, but also like hearing people see, smell things that really aren't there, but they think that it's real. Some of it have been like compared to like having a really bad dream, but you're like awake. So that's kind of scary for like for people who actually have it. They'll have delusions, like they'll believe something that is just not true. Like they'll think that like it's like the CIA is listening to them from like their phones and stuff like that. Like they'll believe that delusion. The negative symptoms, like it'll have trouble. It'll show like there's low interest in just your everyday life, just depression and just confused. Some of the cognitive issues are remembering things and just staying on task and just being unaware that you even have it without being diagnosed yet. Like I said before, like some of like the behavioral stuff is the delusions and different types of delusions. They have like a persecutory delusion, which is like a device in the head, which like I said before about like the CIA planting, listening and stuff, the hallucinations, the auditory part of the delusion and stuff, visual, hearing, same thing. In this picture, those are like the different parts of the brain that it affects. And the things that causes schizophrenia, genetics isn't the main cause, but sometimes it can be like an environmental thing. You can develop schizophrenia like over time. During environmental causes, exposure to viruses or malnutrition before birth, and also just your brain chemistry. Problems with certain brain chemicals like neurotransmitters and dopamine can contribute to schizophrenia. And those neurotransmitters allow brain cells to communicate with each other. So, yeah. And this is like a video. It's about a college student who actually had schizophrenia. It's like 15 minutes long, but I'm not gonna show the whole video.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of
And
it's
there was
crazy.
my video, it was like recommendations
Yeah.
after that.
But
Yeah.
I don't know if it ain't showing. I don't know how to turn it on.
It's a really good video.
It is. I can get
Yeah,
it
they
to
have
work.
really good medication for schizophrenia.
I don't know why the video not turning on.
And now I'm wondering if anybody good with these type of computers? I always use the.
But it was like a TED Talk video, like the ones that you just showed.
Okay. Maybe you could right click and it would say like copy. Yeah, maybe copy and then paste it into a web browser.
I think it's their open link. And we just click something.
Oh, okay. So you could copy it or there's no link, whatever's the easiest.
Okay, I'm gonna just look it up on here. Here it is. I'm not honest. But yeah, it's like 15 minutes long, but I'll just show like a couple minutes of the clip because it's too long.
And I'm an astronomy and astrophysics major here at Penn State, and the founder and president of the Penn behind a dense core. That core could be our pulsar. This discovery opened some doors for me, such as helping represent the United States in the International Space Olympics in Russia, and also being a Virginia Aerospace Science and Technology Scholar. I know what you guys must be thinking, what a nerd. Nerd alert! Well, for the longest time, this nerd had a secret that I was too scared and too embarrassed to tell anyone. That secret is that I have schizophrenia. But what is schizophrenia? It's important to think of schizophrenia sort of as an umbrella-like diagnosis. NAMI shows these different symptoms as ways you could diagnose having schizophrenia, such as delusions and hallucinations being sort of the hallmark type of characteristics. But it's very important to know that a person can have schizophrenia and not have delusions and not hallucinate. Each person's story with schizophrenia is unique to their own. Today, I'm going to be talking about my story with schizophrenia. It's been thought of that I've had schizophrenia all of my life, but it became very prevalent my junior year of high school and then just snowballed into college. February of 2014, my freshman year of college, my life changed when I tried to take my own life through suicide. Why, you ask? Because my life had become a waking nightmare. The following images have been edited using Microsoft Artistic Effects because they are just too triggering for me. At this time, I had started hallucinating. I started seeing, hearing, and feeling things that weren't there. Everywhere that I went, I was followed around by a clown that looked very similar to the Stephen King's adaptation of It. Everywhere that I went, he'll be giggling, taunting me, poking me, and sometimes even biting me. I would also hallucinate spiders, sometimes little spiders, and these are the most intrusive sometimes because we see little spiders in real life. So sometimes it's the only time I ever have difficulty discerning whether it's a hallucination or real life. I'm very good at knowing when I'm hallucinating. And I know that it's a chemical imbalance inside of my head. I don't give these hallucinations even names. I also hallucinate giant spiders though. One spider in particular comes to mind. It was rather large, leathery skin, dark black legs, and yellow body. And no voice ever came out of its mouth. However, when it moved its legs, the creaking of the legs sounded like young children laughing. It was very disturbing. But it started becoming unbearable when I started hallucinating this girl. She looked sort of like in the movie The Ring. The thing with her is
That's
she
like
was
the
able
scary
to
nightmare
continue
stuff
on
I was talking about. Like
Yeah.
you just see that.
and
like
would
it's
know
nothing.
exactly what to say and when to say to chip away at
I'm
my
terrified.
insecurities. The worst was she would also carry a knife around with her, and she would stab me, sometimes in the face. This made taking quizzes, doing homework in general, extremely difficult to impossible when I was in college. Sometimes I wouldn't even be able to see the paper in front of my face because I was hallucinating too much.
Okay, so
I don't usually speak
That's all I'm gonna
so
show for right
openly
there.
about my hallucinations.
but y'all get like the whole big picture, like basically the things that she's going through with the hallucinations and delusions and all of that stuff. I'm gonna go back to the PowerPoint.
She looks pretty good talking about it now. Like there is good medication for it now. which is-
But she goes on like throughout the video about it, like how it affected her, like just being in college, how it affected her, her grades and stuff like that, and like what she's doing now, like afterwards, and how she's like handling it and stuff. So yeah, how people would diagnose a psychologist, whoever, like I said, 2 or more symptoms of the delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, just chaotic behavior, and all the just negative symptoms with that. And for treatment, there is no cure for schizophrenia, but it's managed by antipsychotic meds, psychotherapy, and behavioral therapy, and community treatment and supportive therapy as well. And I think that was it.
Any questions? The medications really are good for schizophrenia. In the past, if you were diagnosed with that, you were giving, like
Yeah,
you couldn't get up and give a TED talk, you know what I mean? Like, so it made it hard. And is yours also turned in here, or is it?
Yeah.
Okay. And you wanted to go today?
Yeah.
Alrighty, let's get that one back to submissions. Awesome and good work. I know we are How do you spell your last name?
ADHD, AKILAHD.
Oh, okay. Okay. Awesome. I still can't believe we get 10 days off a week from today. I'm like still in shock from it.
I feel like teachers still gonna be making us do work, like it's.
Yeah, I still got work to do.
You guys have your final in here, which is nice. So you can work on it if you want to, but you can take a break if you want.
So the final, what's the, ain't it a paper?
Right, it's the same paper in the syllabus to write about. Either you could do it on schizophrenia or whatever you're presenting, or you
Oh,
can.
it's just on another topic? That's no topic.
Yeah, I'll show it to you.
It
It's,
takes time, that's okay.
it shows
Why is it?
writing about your family of origin, how you were brought up, and if you experienced one of the major mental health disorders in family or with a friend growing up, and then your experience with that. So in the syllabus, it's just like all the instructions are about that one.
Why is it?
And then APA and citations.
Okay. I don't know where I understand. Okay. So mental health disorders are a combination of abnormal thoughts, perceptions, emotions, behavior with others. Examples are schizophrenia, depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety, ADHD. And I chose ADHD. It's an attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And then the symptoms include symptoms of inattention and impulsivity and hyperactivity. And it is also the most common neurodevelopmental disorder in children. Behaviors associated with inattention and impulsivity, with inattention are making careless mistakes, has difficulty paying attention, seems to not be listening when spoken to, fails to follow through with instructions, chores, or duties in the workplace, has difficulty organizing tasks and activities, avoids, dislikes, or is reluctant to participation. In tasks that require sustained mental effort, and then easily distracted by other things like unwanted thoughts. And then with impulsivity and hyperactivity, it's more so fidgeting with hands or feet or squirming in feet, unable to participate in leisure activities quietly, difficulty staying still for an extended time, talks excessively, completes people sentences, difficulty waiting his or her turn. It is diagnosed through the DSM-5. Children under 17, they have to have 6 or more of the behaviors associated with inattention and hyperactivity, and impulsivity, and then that needs to be over within a 6-month time span. And then 17 or older, you have to have 5 or more of the behaviors associated with inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity within a 6-month span. And the symptoms need to be prevalent before the age of 12, and the symptoms need to occur in 2 or more settings: home, work, or school. So at home, you may have difficulty completing tasks, running errands, returning calls and appointments. You lose things like your keys, glasses, wallet, difficulty doing leisure activities. And then at work, you may be disorganized, trouble sitting, fails to pay close attention to details. And then at school, you may have trouble waiting your turn, and then you are very talkative and interrupting others. ADHD can carry on into adulthood, even though it is more so a child disorder. The symptoms are less prevalent, but they still occur. Hyperactivity is more so shown as restlessness, and you wear people out because you're just so hyper. There are 3 kinds of ADHD, which is the combined presentation. So inattention and hyperactivity and impulsivity. And then there's the predominantly inattentive presentation. It's more so inattention So you have trouble focusing more so than hyperactivity, where you're less fidgety. And then there's the predominantly hyperactivity impulsivity presentation, where it's more hyperactivity impulsive rather than inattention. And then the treatment options are medication. The central nervous system stimulates, increases dopamine and
Norepinephrine.
how do you say that?
It's probably like norepinephrine. I can't see it, but.
Okay. Yeah, basically it increases the amount of dopamine. And then it reduces hyperactivity, improves the attention span. So you're able to focus a little bit more on your task. And then therapy is also another treatment option. It allows for you to tap into your feelings about your condition. And then behavior therapy basically teaches you how to control, monitor your behaviors in appropriate situations. The cognitive behavior therapy is a short-term goal-focused approach used to change negative patterns of thinking. And then my services. Okay.
All right. Anything that is coming up more, it's true that this is the most diagnosed, because we used to diagnose it all the time at Lighthouse Youth Services. One thing that's come up with this, though, is that
United States thing.
possibly, but
Well, ADHD is the United States thing.
more that we've misdiagnosed a lot of kids that have trauma with ADHD because they have similar characteristics. So it's just something to look out for as you're, if you do get into assessment and diagnosis. I know you need your license to do that. So for social workers, we get a Bachelor of Social Work or a master's in our license. I think in psychology, do you guys get it in your master's level or doctoral level? I can't think. Okay, right. Yeah, and then in social work, you do independent license. And so, yeah, they did give me that diagnosis as a kid. And the medication was helpful. It's mostly a stimulant. So it was like Ritalin back then. And
So is it true that they give you Adderall for ADHD?
they can, yeah.
Why?
Because it could speed you up, you're saying?
No, I'm saying like this, like ain't that like what people be addicted to?
Right, it is, yeah, absolutely. So it's supposed to have the reverse effect on someone with attention deficit disorder. But what I've found also is that I actually use just coffee and it has very similar effects, like it's able to be helpful in that sense. So it's certainly something to consider. And do you guys have any other questions for? Make sure. Huh. Let's see here. You guys ever seen the Dallas Buyers Club?
Mm-hmm.
You ever heard of this streaming thing called Peacock?
Yeah, I got it.
I never heard of it, but this is free, and this is about a dude in the 80s that helped with the FDA-approved drugs, and it is pretty good. It's very not PG-13. It's probably more like rated R because it has some pretty bad scenes, but it's a real true story about buyers clubs that were big in the 80s to get medication and vitamins to people that were HIV positive and had AIDS. So, also, how interesting. I was finishing up with, did you guys ever hear of DARE?
Yeah.
As a kid? I forget when they stopped doing it.
It's like telling you not to do drugs.
Yes. And there's research showing how much of a failure it was. So that was kind of the gist of it. it was definitely, I can't remember the video I was shown from last week, but it was definitely a large failure. So they kind of shifted to other videos that were helpful. Well, yeah, this is, I think it came from this and then the one underneath it, but just like all of the DARE's struggles and things of that nature. But as we finish up, you guys pick some good presentations for this as we finish up, like middle adolescence. And all of those are kind of like things that you'll work with clients that are in middle adolescence. But finishing up with the drug. So drug and alcohol use, the majority of high school students report having consumed alcohol. Really up until like 25 years ago, you were allowed to drink alcohol at the age of 18, but it had to be 3-2, probably in Russia too. So if you're 18, you can drink. Now I think we can't even buy cigarettes here if you're not 21. I think they changed that.
They need to just, cigarettes, I don't even know why cigarettes, but I know it, the government keeps doing it because it causes cancer.
Right.
Lung cancer, all that stuff.
Right. But somehow we had a report that binge drinking has gone down. So only 17% of 12th graders had reported binge drinking, whereas it was like 25 to 35% in the past. The three factors differentiated problem drinkers for adolescents: personal qualities, social environment, and then other patterns of behavior. So you guys probably all had seen, I think you shared about a friend who had struggled with like bad weed and then just fell off the map. Also, folks that might not drink until you get into high school or college, and then they clearly have a problem with it. Everybody knows at least one, and it may be a family member and it might be a friend, but it has that diagnosis from the DSM is like clearly once they start drinking, they can't stop very well. Is there's still that wasp trying to survive in here? It is scary. Luckily, this is the last slide. So, intervention programs used to be DARE. So, yeah, have any of you guys heard of DARE? There's a kind of good, quick video about it. But to keep kids off drugs, it was found to be useless. And then also another prevention. Let's see here. Effective prevention, strengthening protective factors while reducing risk factors that increase vulnerability to drug use. So, I don't know. Okay, here it is. This was the video for the DARE, but just kind of showing, it was more when I grew up. Like,
in the dim and distant past, man groped his way blindly, just to survive. Then, in the darkness of his ignorance, necessity struck a tiny spark. Thought was kindled, and the flame of conquest burning in his soul lighted his way to knowledge and the field of scientific achievement which we know today. We present a marker on the path of his present progress, a pictorial record, new accomplishments, new discoveries, new inventions in the world of popular science. Popular science is specializing to an unprecedented degree in the recontouring of American women. Monty McLeary is distinguished as a streamliner, having invented many devices designed to flatten out the bulges or vice versa. The lady complains that one hip is an inch larger than the other, a defect easily corrected here where science adds beauty by subtracting bump. Excess weight is removed as athletes take on the leanness of leopards by exercising. Only here, machinery does all the hard work. In this highly mechanized
just
age,
showing
even
how to
symmetry is
properly?
achieved too.
and that was that was the complaint about DARE, is that they really were kind of putting it out there, and then kids became curious and did drugs. So it was kind of like,
it looks fun.
right. And so this is their kind of complaint about it.
Its vertical rollers exert a firm, steady pressure which holds the tissues in an accumulated layer.
I think she's
It looks
snorting
like
and
an bird.
coking. It does.
It looks like a commercial.
It really does. Marquise Anderson's here too. For attendance.
While nature loves curves, there can be too much of a good thing. Fundamentally speaking, the chair you see has a rolling bottom. This puts the weight on her back, but makes the calves slender. And this takes the weight off her back. Tons of fat are being rolled away, we can't say where, by the mechanized forces of beauty culture. While thousands all over the country pedal their way to ride limb perfection. The exercise is excellent all-round bodybuilding.
There's no way that
What's that? What'd you
I
say?
just feel like this is like a mockery.
Right.
Is that like in the 80s when like crack was really like up there?
What'd you ask? I'm sorry.
I said, was this like taking place in the 80s, like when the commercial,
It's totally the 80s.
when
Yeah.
it was like really everybody was doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll show you one other one that they used to use back then, but there is a lot.
They'll be insulating in shorts shortly. Vapor baths remove body oils, promoting physical fitness. This is nature's way to loveliness. Combining the old with the new, sweet massage is in great demand. A relaxation following the exhilarating contact with the strange instruments that popular science has dedicated to the reduction of the ladies from vessel. May there be a general reduction of everything except the expense of their smile.
Boys are okay with
Right. I know. It's interesting that they do direct that on. So this is the one that I wanted to show. So this explains what a failure dare was. And this is what I grew up with. So,
I'm gonna fill you in on a little not so.
and then I worked at a recovery center, so I kind of saw the
The
failures.
80s and 90s were a hodgepodge of anti-drug nerds trying to ruin our cool lives by telling us drugs weren't copacetic. Eggs on frying pans, because you're on drugs. Learning it from your dad.
I learned it by watching you.
And the granddaddy of them all.
People will tell you that drugs are cool and that everybody's doing them. But you know what? You're wrong.
DARE. Today we're learning how the DARE campaign was a bigger failure than you realized. But before we get started, make sure you subscribe to the Weird History channel. All right, kids, let's take a non-hallucinogenic trip back to the 80s. Some of the earliest studies of DARE's effectiveness exposed DARE as being a pretty useless program for keeping teenagers off of drugs and alcohol. It seemed DARE's zero-chill educational approach to keeping these curious, hormonal, rebellious little hooligans off of drugs was not working, and in fact was having the opposite intended effect. Turns out, teenagers are less of a learn by riveting PowerPoint presentation and more of a do it and see if we die kind of learners. They might have been taught to say, just say no, but they were way more likely to say, ah, yes, to a bag full of those items they learned about in school if they completed the DARE program than those who didn't. If only DARE had listened to its dad and told him this would happen. Who taught you how to do this stuff? Smart. The program that inspired and birthed DARE also failed in its earlier days, suffering from the same arrogant idea that students would blindly listen to an authority, having never seen a John Hughes film or seemingly met a teenager. But when Smart reached out to DARE to inform them of the changes made to better the program by making it work, DARE resisted. It is, after all, right there in its name. The most damning study was commissioned by the National Institute of Justice and conducted by the Research Triangle Institute that said the program was occupying space and hoarding funding from other programs that actually had value and, worked. The NIJ never published the findings that DARE was a dud, so the charade continued in schools across the nation. Meanwhile, our fragile youths were being corrupted by the temptation created by the very thing meant to keep them on the straight and narrow. The temptation.
Yeah, I saw this pencil.
Yes.
As mentioned, DARE was so bad at teen drug that they turned into little Jim Morrisons thanks to a social psychology phenomenon known as the boomerang effect. Basically, by telling somebody they shouldn't do something because they might die, it makes the person morbidly curious to test that theory. Cheating dead? Sounds fun. Couple that with teenagers' very loose grasp on how fragile life is, and well, you're gonna tell dumb kids to do some experimenting. DARE might have been saying doing lines of cocaine can cause your heart to stop beating, but all those rebellious teens heard was, that'll show, Dad.
Who taught you how to do this stuff?
They did have a lion mascot named Darren, and pretty sure Smart did it, so, you know, they knew what kids like. Despite mountains of overwhelming evidence, the general public stood by the DARE program throughout the 90s. Parents loved DARE. It was nice. It had good intentions. There were police involved. It got to talk to your kids about drugs, so you didn't have to. There was a little mascot. What's not to love? Who cares if it was a giant waste of time and money? DARE settled into their impeccable reputation by having the audacity to say knocking DARE is like kicking your mother or saying that apple pie doesn't taste good, ignoring that some apple pie is nasty and it might not taste good. And look, some mothers might need to be kept. What if your mom wasn't moving? You needed to see if she was alive. A little cake might be all that's standing between her and death. And now, since everything is bad and facts are alternative, now there's a push to bring DARE back to school. Oh, did you think the story was not going to involve Jeff Sessions? Because this story definitely involves Jeff Sessions. Former Attorney General and ex-Keebler elf Jeff Sessions said in 2017 that despite research to the contrary, he still believed DARE worked. Why? Well, because he just did. That's enough to spend money on things that objectively don't work, right? I mean, case in point, the wall. At least DARE was cheap, right? DARE cost a ton of money. Daring the lion does not work for free, guys. There was a lot of demand for meddling lion mascots who didn't do drugs and demanded the same life standards for everyone in the 90s. What started local to Los Angeles.
What's that? It's possible, yes.
Look at his eyes.
Yes.
And spread to an estimated 75% of the country. It was so vastly supported that local, state, and federal governments gave the program somewhere between $200 million to $2 billion just in the year 2003. Well, after several studies proved it ineffective.
When it ended.
$2 billion for a program that fundamentally did not work. Only after several years worth of research that could no longer be ignored and a detailed financial audit did the government stop hemorrhaging money into the program. The idea behind the original DARE curriculum was simple. Tell kids about the devastating consequences of cigarettes, alcohol, and illegal drugs, and they'll be less likely to use them. Foolproof, right? In theory, it should work. In practice, it did not. But lazy teachers who didn't want to come up with a better idea and police officers who just needed to show they were trying were convinced that education was their best tool when it came to prevention, without realizing that such a direct approach may not work on young children. Current DARE president Frank Pagarios once said, everyone believed that if you just told students how harmful these substances and behaviors were, they'd stay away from them. Unfortunately, young kids weren't as receptive to the education as a prevention approach. School is boring. Learning is hard. Everybody just wants to go home, watch TV, and eat snacks, and not hear about lung cancer when you're 12 years old. Despite this, the program continued. It was, after all, the 80s, and let me tell you, people hated drugs in the 80s.
You know, getting into drugs and being high is a real stupid thing to do.
Every decade needs a scary boogeyman to rally behind and blame all of our deep-rooted societal problems on. And in the 80s and into the 90s, the blanket term drugs was the 9/11 of the times. And who was steering this illegal caravan of bad hombres? A sweet little old lady by the name of Nancy Reagan. In the early 1980s, America's grandma had it with all of these drugs and demanded the use of America just say no. First Lady Nancy went from school to school telling children to just say no to all of these drugs with a t-shirt. Once she'd absorbed enough child's fear to energize herself, Nancy would swing into the occasional rehab center to gather horrible tales of people. She then shared these horror stories with all of America, which in turn made the whole country say, hell no, to people who said, hell yes, to drugs.
Today, there's a drug and alcohol abuse epidemic in this country, and no one is safe from it.
And the plan worked. A boogeyman was created. The Reagan administration's pulverizing advocacy for anti-drug causes resulted in 64% of Americans in 1985 believing drugs were the #1 issue in the nation. Sorry, AIDS.
So won't you join us in this great new national crusade?
Nancy's PR campaign worked, and America was all in on DARE. Yes, teach our kids the perils of drug addiction, Darren. Give the people what they want. But like the cordless phones, beepers, and the Rachel, DARE couldn't make it past the 90s, as it became
I had one of
harder to
those.
accumulate evidence that the program was deeply flawed and an abject failure. Move over drug abuse resistance education and make way for the snazzy new program with a very unfortunate name, Keeping It Real.
So this one actually
The
kind of
program
worked.
Keeping It Real replaced DARE in 2009 in middle schools and eventually expanded to elementary schools in 2013. Choosing to forego the 45-minute dreary lecture that children normally enjoy, Keeping It Real opts for a more interactive model that teachers and DARE officers noted children didn't hate. Student engagement was markedly higher. Not a regular anti-drug program, it's a cool anti-drug program.
When it comes to cleaning your balls.
So yeah, it's, oh, is that the commercial? I remember that when I previewed this. I guess I didn't mute it soon enough. Sorry.
You can tell this early teen to just say no until you're blue in the face, pat yourself on the back for all the good work that you did that day. But in the real life scenario that this same teen is offered a fistful of bud, the odds are pretty high they panic and say, okay, sure, and just take some of the devil's
He's got a vape too.
Keeping It Real arms teens with more tools in their belt by approaching potential drug solicitations in more realistic terms. The core of the program is in the acronym: refuse, explain, avoid, and lead. Real proposes at first offering an explanation for why they don't want to do something very important and to avoid the issue. I see Billy is offering meth to my classmates. I think I'll take a different route home and maybe avoid Billy for the day. And finally, if that doesn't work, they can leave. Oh, right, I don't have to do meth. I have a body of autonomy and I can just leave and go somewhere where there is no meth. The great thing about this program is it's applicable to so many other scenarios in these young kids' lives. The goal of Keeping It Real is to help kids get out of any situation that makes them uncomfortable, almost as if teenage drug use is a symptom of being a complicated, growing, changing person, trying to fit into a society of insecure, relentlessly cruel teenagers, and not the cause of all their problems. And you know the best thing about Keeping It Real? It actually works. The results so far have been overwhelmingly positive, according to a report of the Scientific American that included students who completed Keeping It Real indicated they used drugs and alcohol less than those in the control group that did not. The report claims the skills and ideas taught by Keeping It Real are more likely to stick with students and reduce substance abuse at a rate that was 72% higher than the control group. The old boring snooze fests of DARE pasts have been replaced with student interaction and group work, teaching them various ways to just say no to drugs. According to Sir Christine Rath of Indiana, a DARE officer for 16 years, the interaction and group work are awesome because we learn doing much more interaction. They learn the ways to say no to friends. We love getting up in front of the class and acting those out. The world doesn't need any more drug addicts or alcoholics. So what they definitely do need are more improv troops. To DARE keep you away from drugs, alcohol, and cigarettes, let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.
It did not work for most people I grew up with. So, what year did you guys all finish high school? Would it have been like 2018? Okay. All right. So that brings us, luckily, to the end of adolescence. And we'll be doing chapter 8 for the week before Thanksgiving. And that is all I have before my computer dies. Right on time.
We'll continue young adults or something like that.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, that's us.